Oh, I'm sorry for that. Everyone can hear me loud and clear, right?
Yes.
Cool, cool, cool. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the 7th, I think, TallinnJS. And today I'm going to present you a very, let's just say, warm-up talk about ESLint and the custom rules. I hope you're going to enjoy it and we will have fun together, or not. So just in case if you're not sure what actually Veriff is doing, I'm going to give you a short introduction. We actually provide an identity verification. And let's assume you're an astronaut and would like to open your bank account from the space station. Well, you can do that using Veriff, because bank is just going to reach for our API, create a session for you. You're going to upload your docs. Of course, you have your passport in a space, right? And we're gonna take your photos away, do some magic in the background in our magical black box of verification, and you will get, bank will get the resolution, are you a good astronaut or you're not very good astronaut? Well, of course, all astronauts are very good. So you verified and you have your bank account from the space station. This is Veriff. About me, well, yeah, I'm a staff quality engineer, and everyone asking what the hell is staff? Well, it's not a weapon and not a magical artifact. It's just a little title which means that I'm master of everything and doing a lot of things related to end-to-end testability, public talks like this, mentorship, coaching, and other interesting stuff, which is sometimes not directly related to the testing, but hell, this is my job, right? And I'm quite proficient with Playwright. I also used a lot Cypress back then, but now I'm not so big fan of it. And I can talk a lot about the difference between them two. You can just catch me later, and we will have a debate about it. What we have on the agenda? Well, there is 4 main sections. Of course, we're going to talk why the hell you even need these rules, why the hell you need to write your own custom ones. Then we're gonna briefly talk how you can generate your own. And most importantly, and most interesting section, of course, will be how you can actually pass your syntax tree and create your own rule. Because this is actually the fun stuff, you know. The stuff will occupy your whole day or something. Well, in my case, less than half an hour. And of course, it's not like I'm just not going to show you slides because we're going to add this custom rule to the real test project and see how it works in action, in production. So yeah. A side note, before we continue, some things will be not covered just because I have a little bit of time. We're not going to discuss fixers because fixers are essentially just a function to fix your code. And I'm more interested in detecting problems right now than to fixing them. They're not too hard to implement, but it's basically a separate talk material, okay? TypeScript are not going to be discussed. See you all on TallinnJS. I'm actually a big fan of TypeScript and Playwright by default, for example, using TypeScript. I'm just not going to, focus on the TypeScript because you guys probably know how to do that more than I. And CI/CD, well, we're not going to discuss it in details because I just published my custom ESLint rule as NPM package and just applied it, so it's not like a rocket science. Probably in your companies you have like a very solid flow how you deploy things and how you use things from your internal repositories like we at Veriff do, so suit yourself basically for that. So what is ESLint? Well, I hope everyone in audience actually worked with it. Can I see some hands like who worked with ESLint? It's quite stupid question. Okay. It's very less than I expected. I'm surprised. Anton, don't bring your hands. All right, well, basically ESLint is a very handy library which you can use in Java and TypeScript to detect any issues with your code. As simple as that. And of course, it's not only detecting an issue, it's also enforcing some code style, which can be introduced by your team or your company, or even some common sense logic. That's why we have like Airbnb configs and stuff like this. And besides of just detecting the issues in your code, It can be also fixing that with fixers. And it can even stop you from like merging your pull request with some smelly code or just stopping your pipeline before reaching production. So it's quite powerful tool. I'm using that a lot, and I'm quality engineer, okay? Why, in general, we need ESLint? There is 2 selling points. Well, it's saving a lot of time in code review because your code is already formatted, linted properly, and it looks so good, so nice. The only thing left to check is your business logic. And of course, it can help you to tailor your code analysis just in case if you need something more, because some teams are very picky about their preferences. So why, it's mostly general about ESLint, but what about like custom things? Why do we even need to do something or our own? Well, maybe you need to enforce something, and it's pretty common. And it's quite related to your team play or teamwork or how things are organized in your company and team. Maybe you want to enforce something which is not like widely spread across the other companies. Maybe it's not common. Maybe it's only your preferences on your own, or maybe just your team lead would like to see that for sure in all the projects. And as I said before, maybe your team just have a strong preferences. Well, maybe React flow types are better than React experimental types. I don't know, for me it's like kinda the same. So, but there is other things, of course. And for example, if you're working with front end, you will probably have one preferences. If you're a backend guy, you're probably gonna have things a little bit different. So again, suit yourself and ask your team how you can reach that. Or you just cannot find open source plugin. Surprise, not all the things actually already written on the internet. And of course, you're thinking like there is a lot of open source ESLint plugins, ESLint custom rules, IDEA configs and stuff like this, but sometimes there is just none. Well, for example, as I said before, I'm working with Cypress and Playwright a lot, right? And we're using Allure a lot. And of course, there is like ESLint plugins for Cypress, for Allure, for Playwright. But you know that there is no plugins for combinations of them. Because it looks like nobody thought like, oh, I'm going to use Allure annotations in my Playwright code. Well, guess what? It's a job for me again. Yeah, I already talked about, of course, you can solve your problem more easily. Probably you're already doing that. Like there is open source ESLint plugins and configs. There is IDEA plugins, and like IDE is already doing so much heavy lifting on the code quality for you. It's have some integrated linters for you. You don't even sometimes think about it. And of course, there is the templates. If you want to produce some quality code, just use templates. They can be suggested by your team, or by your team lead, or by yourself. Why not? And yeah, long story short, you're creating some rule which you're going to enforce for people in your specific team or for yourself if you would like to see that code in prod. Before we move on, I actually have one not tricky question. Does anyone worked with like write their own custom rules before? All right, now I should like not keep eye contact with you guys. And enjoy your journey, everybody else. All right, the problem, because it's all starting with a problem. And I have one, and my team have one. Our team, as I said before, using Playwright a lot. Beautiful framework. I can talk endlessly about it. And we're using that for UI and snapshot tests. Work like a glove, really. And our tests are reporting to Allure test ops. And Allure is not only like fancy reports, which you probably, most of you again, mostly aware of, but it's also a TMS, test management system. So we're using that as a main source for our like test cases. And we, in cooperation with the developers, we're always trying to establish this link between our tests, test cases, and Jira stories. because otherwise it's really hard to keep track what is actually automated, what it's not, is feature is covered or not. And for that, we're using annotations. We're looking like this. We're working from the standard like Allure library for a playwright. And this annotation is just telling you what, hey, this test, even if it's super fake, of course, for a talk, it's actually linked to the story. And because of that, we will have a fancy reports, not only for the CI/CD, but also in our test management system. But sadly, most of our tests looks like this. They're empty, they don't have any annotations, and you have no idea what story is that, how it's connected to your features, no idea. And your reports are blank. Not blank, they're using file names instead of meaningful things. And this is what I really want to see, because it's quite easy to achieve with your custom rules. I just would like my ESLint to fire a warning or an error in case if my annotation will be missing in the test. Simple as that. If the quality engineer or the developer who's actually writing tests in Veriff, yes, in Veriff, developers writing tests, will see that, they will actually think, probably I should add this annotation. It will be handy in the future. And especially if suddenly me decide what this should be an error, and it will be blocked the whole pipeline until you fix it. But I'm good. Warning is okay. Warning is okay. So how we can do that? Task is simple, but how we actually can do that? You'll be surprised, but this talk is actually semi-interactive, because there is actually full workshop online on the GitHub, how you can do all the thing from the very zero to the very production. You can follow steps if you really want, or you can check it later, or just catch me later. I'm going to show you how it works on live environment. But just in case, if you want, you can have a very nice QR code for a workshop. So let's start with the simple things. We have an empty project folder, and we would like to have our own ESLint plugin, and which will contain our own ESLint rule, because plugin essentially can be an aggregation of many rules, simple as that. Of course, you can do everything manually, like if you're super Chad, okay? But I'm not a super Chad. I prefer easy way. And there is a generators to do things. And one of the popular one and one of the default one is actually used a lot for a lot of our things is Yeoman. Yeoman is just a generator for the projects, okay? Like create React app, if you're familiar with that. And it has its own plugin, which allows to generate ESLint plugins. Well, yeah. And the process is like brain dead. You just need to play some text RPG. God, I love text RPGs. I miss them so much. And just init your plugin, because plugin is a capsule for your rules. And when you just invoke the same yo command, there is not even, you can specify parameters if you want, but if you, like virgin as I am and JavaScript, you probably just slap yo and generate your rule. And it's asking some simple questions. One question will be not that simple. It will be example of the test code which will fail. Like, wait a second, why do I need test which will fail? We'll get to that eventually. For now, you just can skip that or send the empty string if you really want. And essentially, Yeoman will generate you a very ready-to-production package. You can just send it to NPM and it will work, but it will do nothing. But it will contain 3 main sections. Docs, you guys love to write documentation, right? I hope you like, because you need to do that. Rules, which is actually core and heart of your project, which will actually check the things in your code. And tests. I hope you like write tests more than write docs. I really hope that, because I don't. And all these folders will not be empty. They will be scaffolded with the files ready for you to interact, ready to you fulfill. So it's quite, brain dead activity, really. But before we move on, let's talk about the main thing, the mighty AST. AST stands for Abstract Syntax Tree. and it's just a representation of your code. Well, I hope it's not a surprise for you, but your code is actually a tree. Yeah, but it can be also represented as JSON, so you can scale, okay? And it can be very complex. It can be very strange, but I mean, your JavaScript compiler, oh, not compiler, sorry, interpreter is totally okay with that. How does the AST works and how the actual compilers works? I mean, interpretators doing something the same, but in a little bit different manner. Well, when you're writing your code, of course, you're just providing your input. Then it's just going for a lexical analysis, which is just going to transform your code to the tokens, because you need to somehow represent your strings into some tokens which you can operate. Then it's going for the syntax analysis. This is the main and most interesting part. It's the actual part where you can analyze your code, take the pieces, logical pieces from there, organize them, compare them, and do operations on them. And the boring part is the magic in the, the electrical stone we call processor, which is actually generate like ISM. I think it's WASM or ASM code from your JavaScript code. I'm not sure. I'm not too deep into code generation. Yeah, lexical analysis is simple. You have your function with argument. It's just going to separate it for the meaningful parts. So you will have your undefined function, you will get your arguments, and some things like, oh yeah, brace is actually punctuator. Syntax analysis is more difficult because it's actually transforming your tokens, not the code itself, but tokens from the previous step into the tree. And the tree have, let's just say, in your code there might be a lot of the elements. So in this example, there is only, wait a second. Too bad I cannot pause GIF. There is only expression statements, which everything is an expression in the code. And there is a call expression, which is actually calling your function. And some things like the panda emoji is just a literal, because literals are strings, numbers, the things you're actually sending to the functions normally, too small one. How does the flow works? I mean, we would like to create our own rule by knowing all these like 30 seconds into IST, thanks to Bogdan. Well, you have tools. You are not alone in that. A lot of people actually kind of doing that if they really want. So there is tools, at least 2 of them. There is a thing called AST Explorer. I'm going to show it in action in a sec. It's a very handy thing which allows you to actually debug and write your own rules easily for any like transpiler and compiler option. Of course, you need to understand how your code looks like and how you're going to parse it. And yeah, you need to select for what you're actually going to use it, because in my example, I think I'm using that for the like ESLint version 8 and using some parser from Babel. Maybe your project have different preferences. For my project, it was like the result was no different, so I just go with default one. And the most important and quite difficult part is actually find your entry point. That's the thing you're gonna hook up in your code, because your code can have a lot of random stuff in it, comments, functions, arrow functions, cycles, classes, objects, all random stuff. You need to find only things you actually need to do. But thank God there is a ESQuery, and the ESQuery is just a language to query your code for these tokens. And guess what? To actually be very successful at this task, you need to write tests. And actually, the whole pipeline is suggests what you are working with TDD. So you kind of have your tests in your brain, and then you move on to the actual creating the rule itself. Yeah, TDD is the key. All right, now required code. Wow, I have so more of them. AST Explorer have actually a snippet functionality. So you can play with the, this snippet is already have the complete, ready working rule there. So you can see how it works from the code, ESLint, and execution perspective. But let me switch briefly to AST to show it how it works. Because it's I really enjoy this tool. So initially it have 4 sections. If you open by default, I'm going to show it briefly, but I'm going to collapse it later. So the left upper part is actually your code, and I only have these 2 tests, but I can actually add something like console logs, I don't know, I'm sorry for that, console logs 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And to the right, you have your syntax tree, represented as the tree, what a surprise, which has all your code elements inside. Of course, you can switch to JSON, but the problem with JSON, it's nice, it's good, it's working. It's not providing any highlight functionality for JSON. So let's go back to the tree. AST Explorer is very handy because it's highlighting you where you are. So it's basically, if I select the test, it's going to show me what, hey, test is actually like call expression, okay, with undefined test. If I just select the full file, it's going to show me the very root of my file, which is going to contain a program itself, which is a module, and 3 expression statements. I think I already said what kind of everything in code syntax is expression. So for here we only have 3 expressions, 2 tests, and 1 console log. And actually, if I press on the console log, I will find that it's also a call expression. To be precise, the log is the call expression. But as it's called from the other object, it's called the member expression. AST can be complex, really complex, because if I click on the arrow function, you can see what arrow function itself has some parameters which you can play with, but essentially it contains your test body. So like this is my test, right, the overall thing, and the yellow thing is the test body, the actual what test is doing. And AST is suggesting, well, hey, your test body is actually the body, the body of the arrow function, and any body thing is called block statement. Comments can be blocked, code can be blocked. If it goes line by line in a function, it's a block expression. If you open one of the expressions, we'll find out what, for example, my call for allure is member call expression. Again, because allure is a parental thing, and we're calling some object method. So not like pure function call. The main idea here, you can play along there and expect how actually your code represented in this AST, because you will need it, because for the next steps, you're going to parse it. And I hope you guys all enjoyed your lead code and hackathon task about tree parsing. I'm going to swipe left. I already mentioned that, but every test in my silly code example is actually expression statements. You can treat like every meaningful thing as an expression because normally they hold something more detailed. And for example, I comment out all the other stuff here, and that's why it's end up in the comment section. And inside every expression, there is a test call expression, because when you're actually executing the function, you're making a call. I hope some of you remembering like your ISM studies from the university. Assembler might be difficult, but yeah, every function expression is a call expression which you can utilize, because this call expression have some arguments. Now, first of all, it has an identifier, so the function name itself, and you can also dig down to the arguments of this function, and that's kind of what we are going to do later. And looking at this example, of course, we can just grab all call expressions from the expression statements from the very program body, but we don't need to do that, and that's the great part actually. Because we have ESQuery, which I already mentioned before. ESQuery is just a library for querying, searching the AST for your patterns. And essentially, it's just like a jQuery, but for a syntax tree. It's very easy. If you're familiar with XPath or jQuery selectors, I mean, you will not even notice any like differences because it's brain dead simple. Yeah. The ESQuery debugger is a different tool, but it's even simpler with that because it's only have two things, your code and your search pattern. So here you can play a lot with regex if you want, but ESQuery by its own has some sort of predefined nodes you can search for. And we're really interested in the co-expressions because our tests are co-expressions. But the issue with that approach, we're querying all the co-expression and my code actually have 7 on them because every function call is a co-expression. Well, what can I do? I can narrow it down because I already know what my co-expression is a little bit special. It has an identifier of test. And in my test framework, every test will start with test. In your task, maybe you have some other code patterns, but you need to find them out. And if I apply this knowledge and very basic knowledge of how to query things in ESQuery, I can just query all co-expressions. We have a name test, and I only find 2 nodes, and this is our tests. Anything else what will be put in my code snippet will be ignored completely, will not affect performance, and efficiently I will only be getting my tests. But of course, to prove that, you first need to write tests for that. Yeah, this is just a clean example how it looks like in JavaScript. But hey, finding tests are not enough. I also need to check what inside of tests. And because that's efficient, effectively what I would like to achieve is to check if the annotation is there or not. In your professional domain, you will be searching for our things. You might be checking for our things. But in my teeny tiny example, I just would like to know what my tests are really annotated because it's very important for me and for my developer team also. And to find the body of the test, I just need to go and guess what? Check the body. Because the body of the test is contained in the block statement because it's like under one curly bracer. It's called the block. And there we have 2 expression statements, which means every line of the executed code is an expression. And if we go a little bit deeper, we will just find out what our expressions about annotations also very special. They have identifier allure, and they have an object, the object we're calling a story. And we can use that knowledge pretty easily. And let's just, for that, as we already catch our tests by ESQuery, we can just filter basically the search results from ESQuery and check what our every test body is actually just an expression with the call inside which have allure and story. Funny thing about filter, if it doesn't find anything in your array, it will return empty array, and it's perfect for us because we can just check what, hey, I would like to check. Yeah, that's the whole rule actually. That's like my whole presentation is about this slide. I know it's ain't much, but it's honest work. But our whole rule is just one search for all the tests, then digging down into the body of this test. And just in case if it's empty, let's play safe. Let's just exit, okay? I'm doing that all the time. And now we just need to grab the body of our test and filter every expression there and check what in the body we will find some allure stories. If not, just throw a warning to that. And the warning will be thrown to your, if you're using VS Code, it will be in the problems section of the ID. If you're using PyCharm, I think there's also a tab called problems. Basically, whenever you're finding your normal ESLint errors, you will find them also. Well, this is the snippet, right? We didn't apply it to anything. It's just the code in thin air. So let's publish it and maybe test it. Well, first of all, thanks to Yeoman, you already have your project strapped with tests. Mocha is already there. The scaffold of the empty test is there. You just need to pre-fill it. The main thing about the tests for the ESLint plugins, you should think negatively. Normally, you're thinking about happy paths, Well, rules is not about a happy path. Rules exist to check issues, to check smelly places, so think negatively more about it. That's why the ratio for the positive and negative tests, 10% positive, 90% negative. You would like to detect these issues. You don't care if your code is perfect, okay? ESLint will be not triggered. Of course, you can just store this snippet in your repo of your project. It's possible. Or you can use npm link. I tried, I failed. I don't know, it doesn't work for me. But the most easiest way is actually to publish it, because it's your Yeoman is already generated a ready to publish package. You don't even need to think about it. In my scenario, I just slap a GitHub action on top of it, and of course I update my token for the npm, and in the 5 seconds I got the same very snippet which you saw before into public in open source. And you can install it. There is a dedicated README how to do that, not on this slide, but in the repo itself. And to enable it in your project, you just need to ask very politely your ESLint to just use this rule from this plugin, which you obviously just installed from npm. And this is how it works in prod. So this is some random spec, of course, from the talk. And this test project is actually included in the plugin repo. Don't ask me why. So I have the same 2 tests here. One of them have annotation, second one is not. And you can notice it's already all red, though, because ESLint is detecting what your Allure story is missing. Simple as that. Yeah. Why even do that? I have a problem before, right? Well, now I don't have this problem. My not annotated tests all visible thanks to ESLint warnings. Both quality engineers and the devs are living in harmony together because they are both contributing to the both tests and test annotation, so we can have a clear picture about health of our product and the quality about product. And most importantly, previously, this annotation thing for automation was a routine. So every week or a month, one quality engineer is go where and annotate all the tests. It can take for a whole goddamn day. So it just was wasting resources on a manual task, which can be either easily automated or at least will be more visible for developers so they can do it themselves, not waiting for the quality engineers, because they already have this Jira ticket. So all we need to slap on their test is Allure story, and everyone will be happy. Additionally, you might not even think about, you might even add Fixer, which will just automatically prefill all your tests with these Allure story tags. Of course, it's not going to select Jira ticket for you. This thing you should probably put by your own. You can block PRs or merge if your ESLint is strict enough, if your rule is very important for your team. Of course, I'm not blocking any deploys because test annotations are missing. But if your team have very specific rule you would like to see for sure, you can just switch ESLint from warnings to errors, and your ESLint check in the pipeline will be failing. And it's not that hard to add another framework. In my example, I used Playwright because I like it. But actually, Cypress is not that different, and the plugin for Allure for Cypress is very similar. So adding additional rules for Cypress will be a no-brainer. It will just take a little bit of time. Thank you for your time and attention. And a little bit of advertisement. We have our code style open sourced, Veriff as a company. So it already have some things predefined for you to use. So if you need, if you're starting your own pet project, or I don't know, a startup, and you don't want to think about such thing as ESLint, you can just use ours, because it's actually very nicely documented. And I'm using that for all my test automation projects. So why not? That's it. Questions?
So, questions. You can raise your hand and I will come to you with a mic and you can ask your question.
Do we need to turn camera on the questions? Yes, our operator is here.
Is there some kind of special setup for questions? No? Okay,
Special
just the
setup.
camera? Okay. So questions, raise your hand with the question. What? Yeah, I will give the mic. Yeah? Okay. So, no questions to Bogdan.
No, come on, guys. Yes.
Okay, nice.
Thank you for the talk. It was quite interesting. I have one question. Do you ever face problem with the performance with your plugins that you have? And do you measure the performance of that plugins, especially in the large codebases?
Yeah, that's a great question because actually, why I mentioned like HackerRank and LeetCode, if you will be really direct with your search patterns, for example, let me scroll a little bit. Blah, 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 blah. As I said before, parsing like the whole program tree can take a real amount of time. And my bunny like test search is actually taking like 300 milliseconds. That's quite big actually amount of time for ESLint. If you will have a lot of rules and you will have them, they will be really complex or they will be not very optimized, it's gonna take time. I mean, it's not gonna affect your like direct workflow, but you're gonna notice that eventually. Because when I first wrote very naive implementation, before I find out about ESQuery, I just parsed the tree down to the root, and it was taking some time. So don't do that. Always try to find the most optimized way. You have a tree for that. You apply your graph theory. I don't know. The showstopper is just your imagination and the skills.
Are you monitoring the performance? So if the project grows and it starts to take more time, are you monitoring it somehow as well?
As far as I know, not. And as far as I know, nobody really cares about that too much. But if you start noticing what some highlights or some ESLint errors will appear much later in the list than the normal ones from the TypeScript parser or something, well, we're probably gonna report that. But ESLint has internal metric system. You can actually check the logs how slow actually is your search patterns. So if you notice any anomalies in that, you can fix that. But I don't know any like third-party tools or anything like that which even can help you. I don't think it's the thing that people think too much right now, at least.
Is your question answered? Yeah, good. I saw another hand somewhere there. Yeah? Okay. Oh, that's a long path for me to walk. I'm getting my steps in.
Thank you for your talk. I wanted to ask, how often do you disable ESLint rules in your project? Basically, how many ESLint disabled lines do you have? And then the second question, what would you feel or what do you feel when you see your own ESLint rule disabled? Thank you.
I like this guy. Well, first question, right, about me disabling the rules. Normally, I don't do that. But, of course, I do that sometimes. Especially if we're talking about migrating old code base to the new one, just to save your sanity, sometimes I'm going for full file disable for some rules, because if there is no fixer for that, like if ESLint cannot resolve these issues automatically, I really don't want to fix them by hand. And it's just not worth it, because the people who wrote this code, they sometimes still in the company and they sometimes doing the same. And I'm not going to like ask them to change their way of thinking. But I can add a warning for that. And about the second question, if someone will disable my thing, well, I will be really offended. Probably gonna cry a little bit in the shower. But I don't think it's too bad. But it's all about trust. So if I will notice that, of course, I will politely ask why a person do that. Is it blocking him somehow? And most importantly, as I said, these rules right now, which I at least which I showed, is the warnings. I don't think you should disable warnings. I mean, maybe they're annoying, but they give you some hint what you're doing something wrong. And if you don't like it, you can discuss it with your team. Maybe you don't need this rule at all. maybe it's time to get rid of all annotations, move on from this routine and ritual. So it's all debatable, of course.
You can probably write a rule to create a warning on disabled rule, right?
You totally can.
Yeah.
Easy, because actually checking for comments, it's not super easy task because all comments for the module will be aggregated in one big array. You can do all kind of crazy stuff there. Of course, yeah.
That's cool. More questions? Hands?
All right then.
No, no questions it seems? Okay, there's one. Cool.
I have a strange question. First of all, how different is parsing this JSX code? And second one is, can you actually use ESLint for parsing like non-JavaScript code, for example, HTML?
Yeah, and no, it's not a strange question. It's a complex one. First of all, J6 is not a problem totally. There is a parsers, there is a plugins for that for ESLint also. For HTML, I think some other tools more handy with that. I mean, eventually you can force ESLint to do that, and it's gonna do that. But I think things like Prettier much more efficient than that, much easier to configure, for example. And there is like ready-made IDE plugins, and it's quite rare what you need like to like force some specific rules on HTML. But I know what, actually no. There is a thing like, there was an example, I think it's, the repo has a reference list. There's a lot of articles and all the links to the stuff. There is one article which the guy used actually the ESLint to help him with AG grid. So every like table cell will have unique ID. So yeah, you can use easily for that. I mean, I see no like obstacles to do that.
But there are probably some separate linters, like we have for CSS, we have StyleLint.
Yeah.
Probably there exists something that is more geared towards HTML.
Yeah, much
not
convenient to use.
And no more question? Your question answered? Yeah?
Yeah,
okay. Okay, there's more. Okay. You're engaged. Nice.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation. So I personally haven't done it, but it seems like quite complex in some way. Depends what rule you are going to implement. But how often do you find yourself doing it actually, like in the company, and how is the process actually? Do you do it just by yourself, or you're like meeting with the team and then decide that you need this?
It all started, of course, starting with the problem. And the thing about this example talk about Allure stories is actually in Veriff, in internal repo, we have the plugin for all playwright annotations, for example. Because it was a real issue, it was taking quality engineer time. So it's all started with the problem, especially if it's manual work. We're trying to cut as much as we can from that. But if, for example, you're working in the dev team, you can also notice what on your code reviews, some patterns of the things you're always fixing. And it might be just misconfiguration of on our person's side. Like, for example, he is using different ID, which has different settings and stuff like that. Or I don't know, he's coding in Doom Emacs or something, or using tabs instead of spaces. But probably maybe your team have some preferences, or your team lead who's doing a lot of code review has some preferences. Instead of like bottling him on every code review, you can try to search for the rule which gonna help you to enforce it in your code style and fix it, for example. Or if you will not find it, you can try to implement this rule for yourself. In that case, any other developers in your team can utilize this plugin with this rule, and there will be no such problem on the code review anymore. So you should find your pain points, let's just say, in your workflow, because probably, maybe if you don't have any, if you don't need custom ES rules, it's totally fine. I didn't need that until like maybe 3 months ago. But when I just realized there is no open source plugin to do that, and I was forced to do that, and it was fun. Yeah, I spent some time on digging into, I need to analyze my code and understand how to create these rules. And my rule code, I mean, guys, I didn't even try, okay? But it works. So you can do much better than that.
So with that, as far as I see, pizza arrived as well. So we can take a break. You can come have pizza, and then we have our second talk by Anton about microservices, micro frontends, sorry. Other micro thing, yeah.
Micro.
So yeah, thank you, Bogdan. Let's do a round of applause.
Thank you.